This just happened the other day at the store I hate more than anything. To understand this story, two things you have to know first. About 6 months ago, I lost my legs from the knees down due to diabetes. Second is the kicker of the story. I have always carried a firearm for many years. I know many officers because I go to the range. This is important. I was at Wally World with my son. He went off with a cart to get some things. All of a sudden, this large woman came up to me and very rudely said, "I need your wheelchair." I looked at her and said no. She then said, "I need it more than you." I looked at her and said, "Lady, I don't care what you want. I have no legs." Then I wheeled off. No more than 5 minutes later, here she is screaming at me saying that I stole her chair, which makes no sense, because on the back of my seat there is a picture of a painting of my childhood idol, Ace Frehley. I looked at her and said, "Leave me alone. This is not your chair." As I started to wheel off, she actually came up behind me, pushed me off my wheelchair, got into it, and took off. Management came running. My son, who is protective of me, came flying through the store. Everyone was trying to help me. The cops were called, and the officers, who we will call Jack and Maria, arrived. I knew both of them very well from the range. They saw me on the floor and were so shocked seeing me lying there on the floor. I then told them everything that happened. When they caught up to the woman, she claimed I stole her wheelchair. As I said earlier, I have always carried a firearm. A friend of mine made me a holster that looks like it carries a cell phone and a small iPad which is attached to the side of my chair. When she was brought to me, she was screaming at me, saying I should be arrested for stealing her chair. Jack and Maria held back laughter because they knew she was full of it. Maria, who is the sweetest and kindest person, saw the holster, then looked at the woman. Jack knew exactly what was about to happen. Maria said, "Ma'am, what is on the side of the chair?" She told them it was her phone and coupons. Maria said, "Can you show me?" And she refused. Maria said to her, "If this wheelchair belongs to you, then show me the contents." She said, "Fine." When she opened the holster, her eyes got larger beyond belief. Jack looked at her and said, "Yeah, this puts an end to this. You are arrested for assault and a felony of stealing a firearm." When she was being put in cuffs, she was kicking and screaming like a 2-year-old. Being in a wheelchair is an adjustment and not an easy one at all. A good friend of mine has about 4 years ago inherited the house of his grandparents. He decided to live there for the time being till he has decided what to do with the house. He grew up in it, so he did not really want to sell it. Not even a week after he moved in, he got a visit from a neighborhood committee. They said they are the 3 board members of the HOA and are here so he can sign his membership papers. They were extremely nosy and rude, for example. One tried to get into the garage without so much as asking. When he stopped him and asked him where he wanted to go, he had the audacity to say, "I need to check your garage to see if everything there is in order. I have a right to do this weekly, and denying me access is an offense that will cost a fine." He then had enough of their audacity and kicked them out of the house. While doing so, one of the board members shoved some papers into his face and told him he needed to sign this right now. He would live there a week already, and the papers had to be signed before moving in. Once they were gone, he took a look at the papers. They were so ridiculous and gave the HOA rights that were simply unreal. They had, for example, a right to visit your home weekly and check things like if you do not use the garage for storage, if you don't have gasoline in containers in your garage, same goes for gas. You had to mow your lawn every week. Snow had to be shoveled every 2 hours if it snowed, starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. You could not park more than 1 car on your grounds except inside the garage, and a ton of other nonsense. A few days later, they came back and asked him why he did not sign the papers yet. They also wanted to check the garage again. This time, he would not even let them in and told them he would not even let them in and told them he would never become a member of their stupid club. To them, that meant war. Within a week, they had sent him fines worth of $1,000, several of which were for denying them access to his home, each worth $250. My friend simply did not take them seriously and used their stupid letters to help fire his grill. Then came the day where they went extremely too far. He came back, and one of the board members had broken into his garage, stood in it, and was writing things down on his notepad. But that was not even the worst part. He had 2 wonderful oak trees in the front of the house. They had been planted by his great-grandparents when they were newlyweds and moved into the house. The HOA was in the process of taking them down. They had called a professional crew for this. One was already so damaged, basically all twigs were already down, it was just a stump that was left. The other one they had just started with. He then lost it. He told the tree crew to stop right now and explained to them that he was the owner and what they did was highly illegal. They had no idea, since the board member claimed these trees were in violation of the rules, since supposedly too many leaves went to the neighbor's garden. He had told them that there was no legal reason to put them down, but the board member claimed he had given his okay because the trees were in violation of rules of the HOA. He looked it up later. They actually had a bylaw that if a garden produces more than 140-liter sack of leaves within 2 weeks, the garden owner needs to take down the offending trees within 2 weeks. He later called the cops on the board members for trespassing, breaking, and entering. They actually had used a bolt cutter to get into the garage. He had it always closed with a big bike lock after they had tried to get in it twice before. The process must have been glorious. Not only did they have to repay him for the lock and the tree, which was worth a ton of money, north of 50 if I remember right, plus damages for the second tree, he had a professional tree person look after it so all the damage healed properly, which alone cost over $1. But these idiots actually thought the trial would have been unfair and tried to fight it, which probably cost them an additional $10-15 in lawyers and court costs. All in all, this trial must have cost them over $120K. Then he went to yet another civil court and sued them for emotional damage. He told them how much these trees meant to him. Since his great-grandparents had planted them with seeds from the home country, he really laid it on as thick as he could. Plus, he felt threatened by the HOA and can hardly sleep because he always fears they will try to get into his house. The court actually bought it and gave him $500K plus the costs for a state-of-the-art alarm system so he can feel safe again in his own home. So, put all together, he cost the HOA nearly $750K. They had to file for bankruptcy and get a person to check the books so my friend would get his money. The best part is the last one, though. The mediator found out that these 3 jerks had been defrauding the HOA for well over 10 years and were giving out as many fines as they possibly could so they could use it to bolster their income. All 3 had to sell their houses so they could pay out my friend. Now, he is for most people one of the favorite people living there, and he constantly gets invited over for grilling and whatnot. You see, most people never wanted the HOA in the first place, but the board member practically forced them to sign the contract, claiming it would not be optional, and if they did not sign before moving in, it would be a $500 fine. Only 6 of the over 50 members actually wanted this HOA, and people think they did get part of the action as reward for spying out their neighbors to find violations. So, a little backstory. I own a $600,000 plot of land, a few trees, but it didn't disrupt my house. The previous owner had fenced the whole area in a small metal fence. All right, so I have this neighbor. His land is a little small, but it's right next to mine, so the previous owner couldn't fence it without having an argument. He told me this, so I put up signs around that area stating warning, going beyond this point is trespassing. A small river also goes nearby, which is where I fish. One day I go fishing. As you can guess, I see this guy walking on my side of the fence, as this was pretty far away from his land, about 50 meters or so, walking his dog. I place my equipment down by the river on a rock and walk towards him. I stood in front of him, and the expression on his face was clearly angry. He yells at me to move it. I calmly explained that he was trespassing and that I could have him fined or even arrested. He started to yell at me, and through the loud words and insults, I learned that this guy's dad is the police chief. He then scoffs at me and continued walking. His dog even chewed up my bait bag. I immediately took my fishing equipment, minus the bait, and went home. I called the cops, but they said that without proof, There was nothing they could do. This got me a little angry, so I did a little research. Apparently, bears live in the forests around both mine and his property. I decided I could use this. I checked his property from the gap, and that's when I realized he had also kicked down my sign. This is where I decided to go from petty revenge to pro-revenge. I saw he didn't have any fencing. What luck! I went to town and bought some paint, metal poles and sheets, some bear traps, and hired some builders. My plan took a full week to finish, but it is finally complete. Metal signs cemented into the ground with the word "Stay Out," bear traps painted on with a bear trap at the foot of each one. I then lay bear traps around all of my property, but it's dense around the gap. I wait in my house for a few days before getting a phone call. It's my lawyer. He says that my neighbor filed a lawsuit and that I should come over to discuss the plan. I do and explain everything. I even provide him with the purchase receipts. When we get to court, I learn what he sued me on. It was about me targeting his dog and purposely injuring it, of which caught the attention of PETA, who had a representative show up. I stayed quiet, only confirming or denying statements, and let my lawyer deal with everything. We won by a landslide, and I was paid $25,000. I did spend some on his dog's medical bill, but that was only $175 since it only caught its tail. Needless to say, the guy stayed clear of my property. I now like peaceful fishing again. I just remembered this story and felt I would share. Cue back to a part-time job. I was working in a small grocery store. This is right after the county had passed a law forcing us to charge for bags. Really, just to give incentive for people to bring their own reusable bag shopping. This, of course, got people angry to no end, and they'd take it out on us. Quick side note, I was actually really good at bagging groceries. I would regularly get complimented on my efficiency at it. People would say, "Give me 3 bags," and I'd counter, "I can get it all in 2. Anyways, I had one grumpy customer who was very annoyed with the bag situation. He did not want to pay 10 cents for a stronger plastic bag. No, he wanted the 5 cents paper bag with no handle. He also demanded I make everything fit into one bag. I warned him, if I put all this into one paper bag, it's probably going to break. Are you sure you don't want me to split it up into 2 bags? But of course he refused. Did I mention that, along with some canned goods, produce, and a few other things, he had 3 bottles of wine? Well, I managed to pack everything into one bag and sent him on his way. Cut to 3 minutes later. This sad sack comes back in the store with a ripped paper bag soaking wet with wine, asking if we'll replace his broken bottles because his bag ripped. Thankfully, my manager shut that nonsense down and flat out told him no. Because that wasn't our fault. He didn't want to buy more than one bag or didn't use a cart.